Hi folks, and welcome to Tech with Troy. Today we're going to walk you through some of the 2018 Black Friday laptop deals available at Walmart.com. Now this isn't intended to be a comprehensive view of their Black Friday ad. To be honest, a lot of the things that you look at, for instance, video game consoles, TVs, those things are pretty cut and dried in terms of evaluating them. It doesn't mean there's not complexity there, but what you see at Walmart and Walmart.com is directly comparable to something that you'd see at Best Buy or at another major box vendor or on Amazon. So we feel there's not much value to be added by going in and giving you information on that. However, when it comes to the laptop scene, one of the things we found is that while Walmart.com does have some of the best deals on laptops, they also tend to have some, I guess I would call them different configurations. They have models that are slightly different than what you can find in Best Buy or at Amazon, or they have models that really there's no reviews available online. So I thought I'd walk you through sort of my recommendations on some of the offerings that you can find on Walmart.com for the Black Friday weekend. First of all, if you go to the Black Friday site, and I'll provide the link in the show notes below along with a link to each of the individual items that we'll recommend, you're probably going to go ahead and click on electronics, and you're going to wind up seeing a sub-link for computers. Now even then, you're going to find that the computers are a little bit confusing in terms of trying to find what's a good deal, what's not a good deal, and so forth. And we've gone through and evaluated these for you. Now, by and large, they've got offerings from most of the major vendors. They've got Lenovo, they've got Dell, they've got HP, and then they've got some vendors that you maybe haven't heard of. And we went through and sifted through the whole set of offerings, and there's a couple that we want to focus on. So let's start by sort of narrowing this down to brand, just to make it a little bit easier as we go through and walk through these things. And one of the brands that I'm really comfortable with recommending is Lenovo. I own several Lenovos. I buy Lenovos for my kids. I recommend to people that ask. They're nice, solid machines. Now, in particular, there's a couple of deals on Lenovo machines at Walmart.com that are just outstanding, and as we'll see through example, they're much better than deals you can even find on the Lenovo site. Now, when you start searching, one of the things that's going to pop up is this IdeaPad 330S right here, and we're going to see that that's one of our recommended deals. But let's even narrow it down a little bit further, because I want to show you how to sort of choose between a lot of I'll be honest, a lot of seemingly very similar deals. So they've got an IdeaPad 330, another IdeaPad 330, another IdeaPad 330, and we wind up with a bunch of Christmas trees and everything. So let's go ahead and make sure that we are choosing just the Lenovo machines. So how do we choose between all these different IdeaPads? Well, let me take you through sort of some of the quick links to some of them, and I'll provide these links in the show notes. Now let's start looking at the very first machine we see, which is the IdeaPad 330S. And notice that these are ranked by bestsellers, so it's not surprising, as we'll see in just a second, that this one is actually the bestseller. Now there's a couple of things to really like about this laptop. First of all, it comes with an Intel Core i5-8250U. That's a 4-core, 8-thread, and if you don't know what I mean by 8 threads, basically physical cores can be divided into 2 what are called hyperthreads, and so it, for some purposes, act like it has 8 computer cores in it. That's a really strong processor. It's good for almost every purpose that you can think of. Now, a little bit misleading, they listed it as having 20 gigabytes. It doesn't really have 20 gigabytes of memory. It has 4 gigabytes of memory installed, and this is actually soldered into the motherboard. And then it has another 16 gig of what's called Intel Optane. Now, that's actually pretty good to start out with, because that 16 gig is basically going to help speed up your hard drive. This thing does not come with a solid state drive, or an SSD as the acronym goes. It does have a spinning platter hard drive. That's good because spinning platter hard drives tend to have more capacity, but they tend to be slow. Having this 16 gig Intel Optane will speed that hard drive up, and it'll make it pretty usable for most purposes. Now, there's a couple of other things that are important to know about this laptop. First of all, it's great the way it comes out of the box in terms of having 4 gig of RAM for running Windows 10, and the fact that it has the hard drive for giving you a lot of storage capacity, and then, like we said, the Intel Optane just helps speed that up. But The Intel Optane is actually installed in a slot where you could take the Optane out and put in a relatively cheap, inexpensive SSD and have that as your boot drive, and that would make this machine quicker. The other thing is that in addition to the 4 gig of soldered RAM on the motherboard, it comes with a single DIMM slot, as it's called, that you could insert another up to 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now we'll put links in the show notes, but very quickly you could get both the RAM, and here's an example. You can get an 8 gig SODIMM, as it's called, which stands for laptop RAM, for about $60 at Amazon. And likewise, there is a particular type of SSD that you'd want to get, which is called an NVMe SSD. These tend to be a little bit quicker than even normal SSDs, about 4 times as fast, and SSDs themselves are about 5 to 6 times as fast as a hard drive. So getting one of these NVMe SSDs for you can get now these are not well-known brands, but they're fairly highly ranked on Amazon. So getting a My Digital SSD, it'll be smaller than the hard drive. It'll have 128 gig. There's some 250 gig SSDs. The one that Amazon, of course, recommends is going to be the Samsung 970 EVO. That's a little bit expensive. Actually, all these things have come way down in price, but it's a little bit expensive compared to what you'd pay for some of the other brands, particularly if you were willing to settle for just enough to sort of boot up, which is what 128 gig would be for you. So, if you were to get this laptop, is it going to be good right out of the box? It sure is. Could you upgrade it? Yeah, you could upgrade it by adding an SSD and by adding additional RAM. And one of the things we're going to do is offer a follow-on video. If you're interested, please let us know by leaving a comment. But offering a follow-on video where we walk yourself or kids that you buy this laptop for through how to do the upgrade using parts that you can get from Amazon. And you'll wind up with a really good machine. Now, one of the other things we wanted to point out, though, is that this particular configuration, right, the i5-8250 processor, 4 gig of RAM, etc., for $349 is a steal. You can't get any place close to a good laptop from Lenovo itself on the Lenovo website, and you can't find really this type of configuration where it comes with a 1 terabyte hard drive and it has the Intel Optane and so forth for any place close to this price on Amazon. But one of the things that you'll find a little bit confusing is that there's a lot of pretty similar configurations even here on Wal-Mart.com. So for example, in addition to this configuration, they also offer, and we'll just switch over to it, they also offer another configuration of almost exactly the same machine, except instead of having an i5 processor, it has an i7 processor. Now, this is about $499, and again, you could get it, you could upgrade the RAM, you could upgrade the SSD. To be honest, what you've got here is you've got a really fast engine and a rather regular car. In terms of the processor is probably more powerful than most of you are going to need if you're buying this type of machine, but it still comes with a spinning platter hard drive, and it still only comes with 4 gig of RAM. So if you need the additional processing power of the i7, go for it. But to be quite honest, that i5 that we first looked at is for $349 is probably a better deal. Now, some of the other, again, similar configurations that you're going to be interested in that we would probably recommend against include this one right here, which is an IdeaPad 330. Now, it actually is priced a lot lower. It's $229. It also has 4 gig of RAM. It also has a 1 terabyte hard drive. Now, the 330 versus the 330S, the 330 is, I think, a little bit thicker. I think it also comes, and if this is important, it looks like it might come with a DVD drive. The 330S, which we just recommended, does not. This does have a DVD drive. However, one of the things we would caution against, this does not have an i5, i7 processor. This has a Celeron processor. These are only 2 cores, and they tend to be slower. Could you upgrade the RAM? Could you upgrade the hard drive? You sure could. And it comes in, looks like the purple sold out, but they've got red, silver, and black. To be honest, I don't know that I would recommend this machine if you're going to do anything intensive with it. If all you want to do is watch some videos on YouTube, maybe check your email and stuff like that, it's a great machine. And if you want to use it to watch DVDs, it's got that built-in DVD drive. You can't beat it. But if you're buying this for a more general purpose machine, and you're actually, let's say, going to be doing a couple of spreadsheets or having your kids do schoolwork on it, and even, let's say, larger Word documents and so forth, I would recommend getting something with a Celeron N4000 processor. The other thing, and this is sort of funny, there's yet another configuration of the 330S series, which does have a i3 processor, which is better than the Intel Celeron processor. I would actually, and even though it's exactly the same price as the 330S with the i5 processor, I could see where somebody might actually want to get this. And again, why is because this does, once again, have a little bit more processing power. Now notice that it does not, unlike the Celeron we just looked at, come with an optical drive. It looks like, and if we page through and look at the right-hand aspect, yeah, it doesn't look like it even has one in the picture. So again, you know, I could see where if you wanted to have a little bit longer battery life from an i3 versus an i5, I could see where you might get this, but to be quite honest, no, I'd get the i5 over this. So of all the 330S machines, the 330S with the i5 going for $349 is probably the best deal. Now, one of the shortcomings of all of these IdeaPad machines, though, and we sort of glossed over this before, is that their display actually has a 1366 by 768 resolution. Now, to be honest, this is fine. I don't have any problem with it, but what it means is that your icons tend to be a little bit bigger. Things are just larger on the screen. You can't really shrink them down to make yourself have a lot of icons on your desktop or have a lot of resolution in pictures. For videos and stuff like that, to be honest, it's great. But if you want something with a little bit higher resolution, you want what's called a full HD screen, none of the Lenovo machines that they have in this price range on the website are going to do that for you. We did find another very interesting set of machines from a manufacturer that we haven't actually heard of. To be quite honest, I've bought things from Wal-Mart.com from manufacturers I haven't heard of before, and I've been very impressed with their quality. And this is an example. I think we're going to go ahead and buy one of these, and then we'll do a follow-on video and unpackaging and actually usability. This is an interesting machine, and I want to point out why. So this laptop from Evo, E-V-O-O, it's smaller than the IdeaPads we were just looking at. It's only 11.6 inches. But one of the things that's really interesting is that it actually comes with a 1920 x 1080p full HD resolution. So you can get a lot more on the screen. In particular, if you're buying this for a younger person who's going to use it in school or something, it's probably going to allow them to have a lot more icons, see a lot more richer detail, if you will, in pictures and so forth. Now, couple of things. They don't really say what type of processor this is. They do say it's a quad core, so it's got 4 cores in it. I imagine that this is probably, again, one of the Intel Celerons or one of the Intel Pentium chips. Now, one of the things that's really interesting is the fact that it comes with 3 gig of RAM. In just a second, I'm going to highly recommend against anything that comes with 2 gig of RAM for running Windows 10, because it's not enough. You can run the operating system, you can open a couple of tabs, but as soon as you try to, for instance, open more than just 2 or 3 tabs in a browser, or as soon as you start trying to run a video, having only 2 gig of RAM is a constraint. And usually what I do is I recommend 4 gig of RAM to folks. I haven't really seen many laptops with 3 gig. Now again, at this price point, at $109 for 3 gig of RAM with a full HD screen and with a micro HDMI output. Now this isn't a regular HDMI like you have on a TV, but you can get a fairly inexpensive cable, and we'll put the link in the show notes to this too, that has micro HDMI on one side, full HDMI on the other side. So it's potentially possible that you could basically show the screen from this on your TV at home. and that your kids, if they're going to use it for class and for presentations and so forth, could just basically carry around a nice cable that has micro HDMI on one side, HDMI on the other side, and use that for their presentations. Now, there are a couple of downsides about this. In addition to the fact that we've already said they don't really say what type of processor, and we think it's either a Celeron or just a Pentium, both of which are lower level than the i3, i5, and i7 that we saw on the Lenovo machines before. Secondly, it only has 32 gig of storage, and unlike the Lenovo machines, this type of storage, let's see, they don't specifically say what it is, but it's going to be what's called eMMC, or extended micro memory card, or excuse me, embedded micro memory card. So this is basically soldered onto the motherboard. You can't upgrade it. It's not as fast as an SSD. It's a heck of a lot faster, to be honest, than a hard drive, but you're going to be stuck with that 32 gig. You can't increase that amount of gig. The 3 gig of RAM, I suspect that you can't increase that either. Again, I've never really seen a laptop that comes with 3 gigs, so one of the reasons I want to buy it is to open it up and see what it is. The other thing I wanted to point out, though, is that it comes with Windows 10s. Now, Windows 10 version S, if you will, is basically a version of Windows that will only run with apps from the Windows Store. Now, if you're going to be using either just browsing, using the Microsoft Edge browser, and you'll go to Google or Chrome and use spreadsheets and everything there through a browser, that won't matter to you, other than the fact that you might not like the actual Microsoft Edge browsing tool. Every machine that I've seen with Windows 10s does have the opportunity to upgrade to Windows 10 Home Edition, which will allow you to run apps that are not from the Windows Store or software that's not from the Windows Store. So if you're going to get this and you're planning on using it with just Microsoft products like Microsoft Word, Microsoft Office, Excel, and so forth, and or browsing, then you could stay with the Windows 10s version. Windows 10s will run in less memory than regular Windows, and it seems to be much more efficient at doing so. Like I said, I suspect that they don't say here, I suspect you can upgrade this to full version of Windows 10. Again, it's one of the reasons I want to get one of these, is to take a look and see what you get out of the box and what you can do with it. Now, I do like this machine, and like I said, it's interesting. It's certainly at that price, so I think we'll pick one up. One of the things I want to point out, though, and I'm not sure if sometimes there's some inconsistency on how Walmart employees post things to the website, but this is the purple one. It's got 3 gig of RAM. I actually prefer the blue, but it lists as having 2 gig of RAM for the same price. And if you look down in the details, it says 2 gig there. So I really suspect that maybe the different colors here actually come with different amounts of RAM. The black one, it doesn't list the RAM up here, but it does say down here again it's 3 gig of RAM. And the silver one, again, it doesn't list up here, but it does say 3 gig. So I be a little bit cautious on buying the blue. I like the blue one myself, but I think if I buy one and then do a follow-on video with it, we're going to use purple. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out, and remember, we're going to have links to the ones we recommend in the show notes. There's a lot of very similar items being offered from this same third-party manufacturer, EVOO, on the Walmart site. And the rest of them, while also interesting in their own ways, are ones that I would steer clear of. So there's a 10.1-inch laptop also. It explicitly says 2 gig of memory, and again, checking down here, it says 2 megabytes of memory, which has to be a typo. I would steer clear, even though it's invariably going to, it says it runs Windows 10 Home rather than the Windows 10s. You can't run Windows 10 Home with 2 gigabyte of memory and be very comfortable with it. You're going to have a slow processor. Again, it doesn't say what type of processor, but I imagine it's either a Celeron or a Pentium, and only 2 gig of memory. It's not going to be a pleasant experience. So I would not recommend buying the 10.1 laptop. Likewise, there is another 11.6 laptop that's convertible. That is, it's one of these 2-in-1 devices where it looks like you can fold back the screen to make it into a full tablet, or as you see below, you can do tent mode, or you can do what I call presenter mode, which is making it so that you can not have to mess with the keys. Again, I would not recommend this one, and the main reason is it's a little bit more than the non-convertible version, but more importantly, again, I'm assuming that's a typo, it has looks like 2 gigabytes of RAM. And again, don't try to run Windows 10 Home in a 2 gigabyte machine. Let's see, other interesting, somewhat interesting machines from EVOO. Again, Windows 10, 2 gig of memory. This one is actually a tablet, I guess, where you can undock the screen portion and all the processing power and everything's there. If you're running Windows 10, don't go with 2 gig. And then finally, just to sort of round out the list of things from EVOO that, while interesting, I would steer away from. And this one I'm not going to say that I would steer away from. There is, again for 119, and actually EVOO Chromebook. So it sounds like it's pretty much the Chrome version of the laptops we've been looking at. It only has 16 gig of memory, or excuse me, 16 gig of storage, and I'm assuming that they mean 2 gig of RAM here. This one isn't so bad a buy, and here's why. With the Chrome operating system, you don't really need as much memory. I would still prefer a 4 gig machine, but some of the other features in terms of having a webcam, in terms of, let's see, I think it said, yeah, it has a, looks like it has an SD card slot, and all of the EVOO machines we looked at have SD card slots, so that's not necessarily a telling thing. But if your kids are going to be working, or you are going to be working primarily in Google Chrome, and you're comfortable with the Chrome operating system, this might be doable. But to be honest, I'll be completely upfront. You can probably find a deal on a good Chromebook at Best Buy for Black Friday that has 4 gig of RAM, and I would really recommend one with 4 gig of RAM. Now, just because we've been talking so much about this EVOO, there's one other laptop that I did want to mention. And if you really wanted to get the convertible one instead of the regular, just open up the screen to about 135 degrees version, which we first looked at for the EVOO, there is a convertible that looks like it might be worth getting. It is a again, they say megabytes, but they mean gigabyte. There's 4 gig of memory, 32 gig hard drive. Again, it's an eMMC hard drive, so you can't upgrade it. But it comes with Windows 10s, it comes with a stylus, and it is convertible. So if, for whatever reason, you or your kid really want a machine that could be used in tent mode like this to watch videos and so forth, this actually does not seem to be a bad one. And again, the reason I'm full out recommending it is that the resolution is 1920 times 1080, just like the 109 EVOO machine that we first talked about. So I will post a link to this one in case you are looking for a convertible, and I'll post a link to the non-convertible $109 one that has 3 gig of RAM, just because it looks interesting and it might be a potential opportunity. Now, we're not going to exhaustively go through all the other brands on the on the Walmart website, but there's a couple of sort of more name brand machines that deserve quick mention. First of all, one of the interesting things that they've got, and if you have yourself or a kid that's looking for a gaming machine, they have a Dell G3 gaming laptop. This comes with an Intel Core i7-8750H, which is actually 6 cores, 12 threads, so it's got a lot of processing power. But more importantly, it comes with a NVIDIA GTX 1050 Ti with 4 gig video card. If your kid plays a lot of first-person shooters or another dynamically changing video game where there's a lot going on in the screen and so forth, having at least a 4 gig video card with a GTX 1050 version of it is important. Now, this thing comes with a hard drive and an SSD already installed, and it comes with 8 gig of RAM, so I don't think you would actually find yourself having to upgrade either of these. The operating system will run fine on the 128 gig SSD, and you or your kid could install the games themselves on the hard drive. And you could upgrade each of those in the future, And likewise, I suspect that you can probably upgrade the RAM more if you want. But this is actually a great deal. And by comparison, pretty much the same exact machine right now is selling on Amazon. We'll just click through to there real quick. For $100 more. So again, it's the i7-8750H, same processor, same video card, same 1 terabyte hard drive, and 128 gig of SSD, same 8 gig of RAM. So it's exactly the same machine. So if you want a gaming laptop and you are looking for a good deal, this seems like a pretty good deal to me. Now another good deal that I'll mention is this machine right here. And I do consider this a name brand. You might not have heard of MSI. MSI has actually been selling laptops for a while. I've got several MSI laptops myself. But more importantly, they've made motherboards for quite a while. So they have a pretty good reputation. Now this is not the same i7 that's in the Dell G3 we just looked at. This is an i5-83H. This is a little bit faster i5 than is in the Lenovo machine that we first talked about, which was not intended for gaming. This has 4 cores, 8 threads, so it's a pretty fast i5, and to be honest, for most games, an i5 is just as good as an i7. However, the one thing I'd like to point out is even though it is substantially cheaper than the Dell G3, you'll also notice that it has an NVIDIA GeForce GTX video card, but this is a 1050, not a 1050 Ti. And the main difference here is that the 1050 only has 2 gig of RAM. So, you know, and if you're buying it for a kid, you might give some thought to what type of video games they play. If they play first-person shooters or very, again, dynamic video games, that might not cut it. It'll handle most video games fine, but they might have to reduce the frame rate or the amount of level of detail in the game. They'll know how to do that if you don't. The other thing I'll point out is that it comes with a hard drive. I suspect, although I'm not quite sure, but I suspect that you would have the capacity to add an SSD down the road, but it doesn't come with an SSD. And it comes with 8 gig. It says it is expandable, by the way, down in the liner notes, if you will, to 32 gig. Most MSI laptops are very expandable in terms of RAM. So it has some potential, and it is a great price, but again, you know, it's going to be good for most games, but not most very, very new games. They want probably a 4 gig video card. Now, finally, we hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please like or subscribe to the channel, and leave us a comment if you're interested in seeing follow-on videos, maybe ones that you can either have your kid work through with us or you can work through with your kid, in terms of you get them the 330S or the 330 and you actually follow through and get the SSD from Amazon and the RAM from Amazon, and you want them to see what it looks like to open up the laptop and do a little work and see, you know, how they can get a much more powerful machine for not much more money by doing the upgrades themselves. So if you are interested in doing that, leave us a comment. We hope you've enjoyed this, and we hope everybody has a good Thanksgiving. Take care, and bye.